The stars over the outer rim sparkled with deceptive tranquility, their light casting faint glimmers on the massive hull of the Solace. The hospital ship, adorned with the universally recognized insignia of medical neutrality, drifted peacefully among the void. Inside, the atmosphere was anything but calm. Doctors and nurses moved with practiced urgency, tending to wounded civilians and soldiers from the galactic frontier. In the command deck, Commander Erin Hayes stood with arms folded, her expression grim as she watched the status report stream across the holographic interface. The Solace was running on borrowed time. Supplies were dwindling, and the ship's route to the nearest Allied base had taken them dangerously close to uncharted space. "How long until we clear this sector?" she asked, her tone clipped. Lieutenant Marcus Vale, seated at the navigation console, glanced back. 2 hours, Commander. Provided nothing slows us down. Something always slows us down, Erin muttered, brushing a stray lock of auburn hair from her face. Her eyes darted to the security monitors, scanning for any anomalies. The faint hum of the ship's engines suddenly shifted. It was subtle, but enough to send a shiver of unease through her. Before she could voice her concern, the proximity alarms blared, their piercing tones cutting through the sterile air. "Incoming vessels," Vale shouted, his voice tight with urgency. "They're not broadcasting any identification codes?" Erin's stomach sank. Unmarked ships in this region were rarely a good sign. "Raise shields and patch me through to engineering," she ordered, her voice steady despite the spike of adrenaline coursing through her veins. As the shields activated, the calm tones of Chief Engineer Patel came over the intercom. "Commander, we're detecting a power surge from the incoming ships. It looks like they're charging weapons." "Damn it," Erin hissed. "Bridge to all stations, brace for impact." The first volley hit moments later. The Solace shuddered violently as energy blasts raked across its shields. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles, and the lights flickered as the ship's system struggled to absorb the assault. "Shields at 60%, Commander," Vale reported, his fingers flying over the controls. "We can't take much more of this." "Evasive maneuvers," Erin barked. "And send a distress signal on all channels. Make sure the entire sector hears us." As the Solace veered sharply to avoid another barrage, the holographic display lit up with a flurry of enemy signatures. Erin's jaw tightened. There were too many of them, and it was clear they weren't interested in capturing or negotiating. This was a deliberate strike on a defenseless medical ship. "Commander, distress signal is transmitting," Communications Officer Harrow confirmed. "But I'm not sure if anyone's close enough to respond." "They'd better be," Erin muttered. "Weapons status?" Harrow shook his head. "Minimal defensive capabilities. We're a hospital ship, not a battleship." Erin's mind raced. They had wounded civilians on board, and abandoning the ship was not an option. Route auxiliary power to the shields. Prioritize critical systems and keep the engines hot. If we can't outrun them, we'll outlast them. The Solace twisted through space, its maneuvers desperate but precise. The enemy ships pressed their advantage, their relentless assault leaving the hospital ship battered but not broken. Erin's voice cut through the chaos, directing her crew with a calm that belied the severity of their situation. Meanwhile, light years away, the distress signal reached the Terran Defense Network, a vast array of listening stations and relays designed to monitor the farthest reaches of human space. On the battlecruiser Vanguard, Admiral Jonathan Steele stood in the war room, flanked by his senior officers. "A hospital ship?" Steele's voice was low and measured, but the fury in his eyes was unmistakable. "The Accord knows the laws of neutrality. This is an act of war. We're still verifying the attackers' identities," Intelligence Officer Rowe said. "But based on their tactics and ship configurations, it's likely a splinter faction. Rogue elements." "Rogue or not, they've crossed a line," Steele said. "What's the Solace's status?" Rowe hesitated. "Not good. Their shields are failing and they're outnumbered 10 to 1. Steele's jaw tightened. "How soon can we reach them?" "We're the closest fleet, but even at maximum burn, we're still 3 hours out," Navigation Officer Perez replied. Steele nodded grimly. "Prepare all strike groups. Notify Earth Command that we're engaging. And send a message to the Solace. Let them know help is on the way." Back on the Solace, the situation was deteriorating. The shields were down to 15%, and the hull had suffered multiple breaches. Erin gripped the edge of her console, her knuckles white. The medical wards were overwhelmed, and the cries of the wounded echoed through the comm channels. "Commander, we've got fires on Deck 3, Patel reported. "And life support's failing in several sections." Aaron's voice was firm. Seal off the compromised areas and focus on containment. Get those fires under control. Commander, Harrow called out, his face pale. We've got an incoming transmission. It's from the Terran fleet. Aaron's heart leapt. Put it through. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Admiral Steele. Commander Hayes, this is Admiral Steele of the Vanguard. We've received your distress signal. Hold your position. Reinforcements are en route. Admiral, Aaron replied, her relief tempered by the gravity of their situation. We're barely holding together. I'm not sure we can last until you arrive. Steele's expression softened slightly. You've done your duty, Commander. Just hold on a little longer. We'll get you out of there. The transmission ended, leaving the crew of the Solace with a renewed sense of hope. But Aaron knew hope alone wouldn't be enough. They still had to survive the next 3 hours. The enemy ships intensified their assault, their weapons tearing through the Solace's remaining defenses. Aaron refused to back down, her determination infectious as she rallied her crew. They worked tirelessly, patching systems and improvising solutions to keep the ship functional. In the medical wards, Dr. Lena Torres moved between patients, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. We're not losing anyone else today, she said, her voice a beacon of resolve. The ship shuddered violently as another blast rocked its hull. Emergency lights flickered, casting the corridors in an eerie red glow. Aaron's voice came over the intercom. All hands, this is the commander. Reinforcements are on the way. Stay strong. We're not done yet. As the crew braced for another wave of attacks, the Solace stood as a testament to humanity's resilience. They were outgunned and outnumbered, but they refused to surrender. And somewhere in the distance, the Vanguard and its fleet burned toward them, carrying with it the promise of retribution. The Solace creaked under the relentless assault, its hull groaning with each new barrage. Alarms blared, the acrid smell of burning circuits filling the air, as the ship struggled to hold itself together. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, and the emergency lighting cast the interior in a flickering red glow. Commander Aaron Hayes gripped the edge of the command console, her knuckles white as she barked orders. Status report, she demanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Lieutenant Marcus Vale's hands danced across the controls, his expression grim. Shields are down to 5%, Commander. Hull integrity is critical on decks 3 and 7. Fires are spreading, but containment teams are doing their best. Aaron's jaw tightened. Route all remaining power to critical systems. Keep those engines running. If we lose propulsion, we're done. Vale hesitated. Commander, that'll leave life support compromised in non-essential areas. Do it, Aaron snapped, her jaw clenched and her eyes blazing with determination. Non-essential is a luxury we can't afford right now. The crew worked tirelessly, patching systems and rerouting power to keep the ship functional. The medical wards were overwhelmed, and the cries of the wounded mingled with the hiss of extinguishers and the dull thud of distant impacts. Despite the chaos, the crew of the Solace refused to give in. Admiral Jonathan Steele stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, his hands clasped tightly behind his back as he stared at the tactical display. The Solace's distress beacon pulsed steadily, a desperate cry for help that filled the room with urgency. Time to intercept? Steele asked, his voice calm but taut. 1 hour and 47 minutes, Admiral, Navigation Officer Perez replied. Too long, Steele muttered under his breath. He turned to his tactical officer. What's the status of our strike groups? Fully armed and ready, sir, the officer replied. The fleet's running at maximum burn. Steele nodded, his expression hardening with resolve. Good. Send word to the Solace. Let them know we're closing in. And make sure our forward batteries are ready to fire the moment we arrive. And prepare our forward batteries. When we arrive, I want those bastards obliterated. Back aboard the Solace, Aaron paced the command deck, her mind racing through the options. None of them were good. The ship's defenses were nearly gone, and the enemy showed no signs of relenting. Each volley of fire chipped away at their fragile sanctuary. Commander, incoming transmission from the Vanguard, Communications Officer Harrow announced. Put it through, Aaron said, halting her pacing. Admiral Steele's holographic image flickered to life. Commander Hayes, we're 1 hour and 47 minutes out. Can you hold? Aaron hesitated, her gaze steady. We'll hold, Admiral. But I won't lie to you, we're barely hanging on. Steele's expression softened slightly. Understood. Help is on the way. Steele out. As the transmission ended, Aaron turned back to her crew. You heard the Admiral. We've got to hold. Whatever it takes. In the medical wards, Dr. Lena Torres moved with purpose, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. Nurses and orderlies worked in grim silence, their faces pale but determined as they triaged the wounded. "Doctor, we're running out of supplies," a nurse said, her voice tight with strain. "We've already rationed the Medigel and antibiotics." Torres nodded sharply. "Do what you can with what we have. Prioritize the critical cases. We'll make it work." A tremor shook the ship, sending a tray of instruments clattering to the floor. The cries of patients and the hum of overtaxed medical equipment filled the air, but Torres didn't flinch. "We're not losing anyone else," she said firmly, her voice a beacon of resolve amid the chaos. As the Solace twisted and turned, evading the enemy's relentless fire, Erin's mind raced for solutions. An idea sparked and she turned to Vale. "Lieutenant, what's the status of the drone bay?" she asked. Vale blinked, caught off guard. "The drones? They're still operational, but we use them for medical supply drops. They're not armed." "They don't need to be," Erin said. "Load them with debris and set them to kamikaze mode," Erin ordered, her voice sharp and unwavering. "Target their weapon systems. Let's give them something to worry about." Vale's eyes widened. "That's unorthodox." "We're out of orthodox," Erin replied. "Get it done." Minutes later, a swarm of drones launched from the Solace, each one packed with scrap metal and explosive charges. They darted toward the enemy ships, weaving through the chaos. The first impacts were devastating, disabling several enemy cannons and creating confusion in their ranks. "It's working," Vale said, a note of hope in his voice. "Their firepower is reduced by nearly 40%. Erin allowed herself a small smile. "Good. Let's keep them off balance." On the bridge of the lead enemy vessel, the captain snarled as the drones disrupted their assault. "What are those fools doing?" he barked, slamming a fist against the console. "It's a diversion," his first officer said. "The hospital ship is trying to buy time." The captain's mandibles clicked angrily. "Then we'll crush them faster. All ships focus fire on their engines. Stop them from moving." The enemy's intensified assault sent new shocks through the Solace. Erin's heart pounded as the ship shuddered violently, but she refused to let despair take hold. "Commander," Harrow called out. "The drones bought us some time, but their fleet is regrouping. Engines are taking heavy damage." "Understood," Erin said. "Hold steady. We just need to last a little longer." As the battle raged on, the crew of the Solace fought with everything they had, their resolve unbroken despite the odds. In the distance, the Vanguard burned through space, its weapons primed and its crew ready to unleash retribution. The clock ticked down and survival hung by a thread. The Solace groaned beneath the renewed assault, the once pristine hospital ship now a battered relic of its former self. The shriek of stressed metal and the thrum of overworked engines created an oppressive symphony of impending collapse. Fires raged unchecked in sealed-off compartments, their flickering light visible through cracks in the hull. Commander Erin Hayes clenched her fists as another violent tremor rocked the ship, her mind racing for solutions. "Damage report," she barked, her voice sharp over the din of alarms. "Engines at 40% output," Lieutenant Marcus Vale replied, his voice strained. "Hull breaches on decks 3, 5 and 9. Life support is critical in multiple sections. We've got maybe 20 minutes before structural integrity fails." "Then we don't have 20 minutes, Erin said grimly. "Get engineering on the line. I need options." A moment later, Chief Engineer Patel's face appeared on the flickering communications display. Soot smeared across his forehead and sweat dripped from his brow. "Commander, we're barely holding this thing together," Patel said. "The primary conduits are shot, and we're running on emergency reserves. If they hit the engines again, we're dead in the water." Erin nodded, her jaw set. "Can we divert power from anything else?" "Maybe," Patel replied, hesitating. "But it'll mean shutting down the medical wards. No lights, no life support." Erin closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, the weight of the decision pressing down on her like a physical burden. When she opened them, her gaze was steely with resolve, masking the storm within. When she opened them, her gaze was steely. "Do it," she said. "We'll find a way to keep the patients alive manually. Prioritize the engines." Patel nodded. "Understood. We'll make it happen." Across the ship, the lights in the medical wards flickered and died, leaving an eerie silence broken only by the soft hum of portable lamps and the hurried whispers of medical staff coordinating in the dim glow. Dr. Lena Torres didn't pause in her work, even as the darkness pressed in around her. "Keep moving," she told her team, her voice firm but calm. We've got manual ventilators. Use them. Rotate every 10 minutes. No one stops until we're out of this. A young nurse hesitated, her hands trembling as she operated a hand pump ventilator for a critically injured patient. Doctor, what if they breach the ward? Torres placed a steadying hand on the nurse's shoulder. Then we'll keep fighting. As long as we're breathing, so are they. Understood? The nurse nodded, her resolve hardening. Understood. On the bridge of the lead enemy vessel, the captain's patience was wearing thin. The Solace was supposed to be an easy target, a symbol to crush before reinforcements arrived. Instead, the hospital ship was proving to be an infuriatingly resilient thorn in their side. Increase firepower, he growled. Focus all batteries on their engines. I want that ship immobilized now. The first officer hesitated. Sir, our energy reserves are already depleted from the drone's counterattack. If we overcommit, do it, the captain snarled, slamming a clawed fist onto the console. I want that ship destroyed before their fleet arrives. The Solace trembled violently as the enemy's renewed barrage found its mark. Sparks erupted from the command console, forcing Erin to shield her eyes. The acrid smell of burning electronics filled the air, mingling with the metallic tang of blood from the wounded crew. Engines down to 25%, Commander, Vale reported, his voice hoarse. We're losing thrust. Erin slammed a fist against the console, her frustration boiling over. Options, people. I need something now. Commander, Harrow said, his tone cautious, we're picking up a signal. It's the Vanguard. They're 20 minutes out. Relief flooded through the room, but Erin knew they weren't out of danger yet. That's still too long, she said. We have to make it until they get here. On board the Vanguard, Admiral Steele stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the tactical display. The Solace was barely holding on, and every second felt like an eternity. All squadrons, prepare for immediate engagement, Steele commanded. As soon as we're in range, I want full suppression fire on their fleet. No mercy. The officers around him moved with practiced precision, their expressions grim. They knew what was at stake. The destruction of a hospital ship wasn't just a tragedy, it was a declaration of war. Back on the Solace, Erin made her way to the engineering bay, where Patel and his team were working frantically to stabilize the engines. The room was a cacophony of alarms and shouted commands, the air thick with smoke and heat. Patel, talk to me, Erin said, her voice cutting through the noise. Patel wiped sweat from his brow. We've rerouted everything we can, but the main reactor's about to blow. If we can't vent the buildup, we'll lose the ship. What do you need? Erin asked without hesitation. A miracle, Patel said with a grim smile. Or a really big distraction. Erin nodded, her mind already racing. Prepare the venting sequence. I'll give you your distraction. Erin returned to the bridge, her determination hardening into resolve. Lieutenant Vale, are the remaining drones operational? Vale looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Yes, Commander, but there's only a handful left. That's all I need, Erin said. Arm them with anything we've got left. Explosives, fuel cells, whatever Patel can spare, Erin ordered, her voice slicing through the tension. Target their flagship and make it count? The crew moved quickly, loading the last of the drones with makeshift payloads. Moments later, the drones launched, streaking toward the enemy fleet like fiery comets. The first detonations lit up the void, tearing into the enemy flagship's shields and forcing them to redirect their fire. They're breaking formation, Harrow reported, his voice rising with hope. It's working. Good, Erin said. Patel, start the venting process. Let's keep this ship in one piece. On the enemy flagship, chaos reigned. The captain bellowed orders, but his crew struggled to keep up as explosions rocked the vessel. Their fleet is almost here, the first officer shouted. We need to retreat. Not until that ship is destroyed, the captain roared, though even he knew the battle was slipping away. As the Vanguard burst into the system, its forward cannons unleashed a blinding salvo, streaks of searing energy cutting through the void and tearing into the enemy fleet with pinpoint precision. Enemy ships scattered under the onslaught, their formation disintegrating as the Terran fleet pressed its advantage. On the bridge of the Solace, Erin let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The reinforcements had arrived. All hands, she said over the intercom, her voice steady despite the exhaustion in her eyes. The cavalry's here. Let's show them we're still standing. The Solace shuddered again, but this time it wasn't from enemy fire, it was from the thunderous roar of hope. Victory was no longer a distant dream. It was within reach. The aftermath of the battle hung heavy in the void, the shattered remains of the Accord fleet drifting silently among the stars. Faint glimmers of wreckage caught the distant starlight, casting ghostly reflections that punctuated the eerie stillness. On board the Solace, Commander Erin Hayes stood on the bridge, her expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The ship was still operational but just barely, a testament to the grit and ingenuity of its crew. "Damage report," Erin ordered, her voice steady despite the strain in her body. "Engines are at 15%, Commander," Lieutenant Marcus Vale replied, his fingers moving over the cracked control panel. "Hull breaches on multiple decks, and life support is stable but critical in some areas. Casualty reports are coming in now. Prioritize medical evacuations and structural integrity," Erin said. "We'll debrief once the immediate crises are handled." The crew moved with a weary but determined energy, patching systems and tending to the wounded. The arrival of the Vanguard had turned the tide, but the cost of survival was steep. Admiral Jonathan Steele paced the deck of the Vanguard, his gaze fixed on the holographic display of the battlefield. The destruction was staggering. Enemy ships lay in ruin, their once imposing forms now broken and lifeless. "Admiral," Tactical Officer Rose said, approaching with a data pad. "Preliminary scans indicate the Accord fleet has fully retreated. We're picking up distress signals from some of their surviving vessels." Steele raised an eyebrow. "Survivors?" "Yes, sir," Rowe replied. "Most appear to be automated systems or emergency pods. No active threats detected." Steele nodded. "Leave them. Our priority is the Solace." In the medical wards of the Solace, Dr. Lena Torres worked tirelessly alongside her team. The dim emergency lighting cast long shadows across the wounded, their faces etched with pain and fear. Supplies were running low and the staff had to make difficult choices. "Doctor, we've got more incoming from Deck 5, a nurse reported. "Critical injuries?" Torres's hands paused for only a moment before she resumed stitching a wound. Her brow furrowed, and her voice remained steady despite the turmoil inside. "Triage them. Prioritize those with the best chance of survival. We'll do what we can." The nurse nodded, determination mirroring Torres' resolve. Her voice carried a calm authority, but inside she felt the weight of every decision. Every life saved was a victory, but every loss was a reminder of the stakes they faced. Erin made her way to engineering, where Chief Engineer Patel and his team were already hard at work. The room was a flurry of activity, with sparks flying from welding torches and the hum of diagnostic tools filling the air. "Patel," Erin called, stepping over a tangle of cables. "What's our status?" Patel looked up, his face streaked with grime. "It's not pretty, Commander. We've managed to stabilize the main reactor, but it's running at a fraction of its normal output. If we push it too hard, it'll go critical again." "And the engines?" Erin asked. "We can manage a slow burn for now," Patel said. "But we'll need major repairs before we can even think about another jump." Erin nodded. "Do what you can. The Vanguard is here to cover us, but we need to get out of this sector as soon as possible." Patel gave a tired smile, the lines of exhaustion etched deeply into his face. "Understood, Commander. We'll keep this ship running if it kills us. But I'll be honest, we're running on a prayer at this point." On the Vanguard, Steele initiated a secure communication with Earth Command. The holographic image of a senior official appeared, their expression tense. "Admiral Steele, report," the official said. "The Solace is secure but it's in bad shape," Steele replied. "The Accord fleet has been neutralized, but their actions here cannot go unanswered. This was a deliberate attack on a hospital ship." The official's brow furrowed. "We'll convene an emergency session with the Council. In the meantime, ensure the Solace and its crew are brought back safely. Their survival is a testament to our resilience." "Understood," Steele said. "Steele out." Hours later, Erin stood in the observation deck of the Solace, staring out at the debris field that surrounded them. The wreckage of the enemy fleet floated silently, a grim reminder of the battle they had just survived. Behind her, the faint hum of the ship's life support systems was a testament to the crew's tireless efforts. "Commander," Vale's voice came from behind her. "Casualty reports are finalized. 30 dead, 58 wounded. Most of the critically injured are stable, thanks to Dr. Torres and her team." Erin turned, her expression unreadable. "Acknowledged. Make sure their names are logged and sent to Earth Command. They deserve recognition for what they've done here." "Yes, ma'am," Vale said, saluting before leaving her alone once more. Erin's gaze returned to the void. Her thoughts drifted to the crew, to the patients in the medical wards, and to the countless lives they had fought to protect. The cost had been high, but they had endured. On the bridge of the Vanguard, Steele addressed his officers. "Today we witnessed the best of humanity," Steele declared, his voice resonating with quiet pride. "Courage, resilience, and an unyielding will to survive. Let this battle serve as a message: we will not be broken." A ripple of quiet agreement moved through the bridge, the crew's resolve solidified. His words resonated with the crew, a quiet determination settling over them as they prepared for the journey back to Earth. As the Solace and the Vanguard began their slow return to friendly space, whispers of their defiant stand against the Accord rippled through the galaxy. Traders carried tales of their bravery to distant colonies, while alien envoys shared uneasy glances at the rising threat of humanity. The news reached distant colonies and alien civilizations, inspiring both fear and admiration. Humanity had shown once again that their strength lay not just in their technology, but in their indomitable spirit. Erin stood on the observation deck, the faint light of distant stars reflecting in her eyes. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself a small, weary smile. They had survived. And as long as they could endure, there was hope. "We'll be ready," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship. The words were a promise, to her crew, to humanity, and to the galaxy.